And so let's move on to the next slide. All right. All right, so we'll start tonight's session with a recap. I'm hearing a little echo here. Let me try to figure this out. Okay, so we'll start tonight's session with a recap, review / quiz from yesterday's session. All right, today we'll be talking about Emergency Operation Centers, EOCs. All right, for the past few days, we have been making mention to EOCs. And with that, we need to, as CERTs, you need to know what an EOC is and how you fit into the picture. Anybody know what is an EOC? Just let me put that out there so I can get an idea of who knows and who doesn't and all that good stuff. Anybody know, what do you know about EOCs? You could just turn off your mic and let me know, or go ahead and put it in either of the chat, this chat or the WhatsApp chat. And let me go through the participants. Kimberly, I'm sorry to be picking on you, but what do you know about EOCs? We had mentioned it briefly in Monday's and yesterday's session. What do you know? If you can say, if you don't know anything at all, let us know. If you know a little bit, just let us know.
I'm sorry, but yesterday I wasn't present in the session because I had some stuff to deal with.
Okay, I got it. But on Monday, I think we mentioned it. Have you ever heard the term before? Anybody heard the term EOC before? What do you know about EOCs? Nobody has no knowledge of what EOCs are. All right. Well, I'll make that assumption. So today we'll be defining it. We'll be defining what EOCs are. We'll be looking at the purpose in terms of emergency management and its function. And then we will look into how EOCs are located, how we go about saying, well, this specific building in this location will be the EOC. We'll look at the layout, staff appointment, and then we'll break for about 5 minutes and take a group picture. And then we'll also go over EOC activation. How are our EOCs activated? Who makes that decision and how it is done? And then we'll finally look at the different reports as far as situation reports, which are commonly referred to as SIT reps, start state, and state boards. All right, so moving on to the next slide. Before we do the review questions, and it's about 3 review questions from yesterday's session. I'll just give a quick recap of yesterday's session. So we talked about shelters. Ronnie, I'm wondering why I'm hearing a feedback. I'm talking, but I can't even. Is there something that I need to do?
There's a feedback. You can barely understand what you're saying.
Okay.
The reason is unmuted your mic.
Okay, is this better?
Let me mute everybody.
Okay, I hope that you can hear me better. I mentioned that they can barely hear me.
Do you hear the feedback now, Renise?
Yes, I am hearing it. Wonder if it's because my phone.
Still have that feedback.
Okay.
Say that again.
There's a feedback, mom, and barely understand what you're saying. When you speak like another in echo what you are saying.
Hmm. Um,
Try
I'm just
not
trying
my
different things
right.
here, guys.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why this is doing this. I do see that I have good
It is
connection,
okay
but
now.
for
It
some
is okay.
reason, okay, it's okay. All
No
right, good.
feedback. That's okay.
All right, good. Ronnie, can you please go back to the previous slide, the previous two slides where we have the recap from yesterday's session? Yes. All right, thank you. So yesterday we talked about shelters. We talked about the fact that we have public and private shelters. We have long-term, we have short-term shelters. There are usually predominantly our shelters are schools. Okay. We have in villages, we do have community shelters that are used as an emergency shelter. We went into how we go about selecting and inspecting shelters. We talked about the team that would go around this time of the year before the hurricane season and inspect the shelters. So we have a representative from NEMA. There is someone from the fire department, the Ministry of Health, the school administration. So there's a team that actually go out and inspect the shelters. And so they're looking at different things. And, there's an extensive shelter inspection form that they would fill out and submit their recommendations based on that. We talked about shelter administration. So the actual people in the shelteries. Shelteries can actually assist you in the management of shelters. So when you're managing a shelter, more than likely, if you're in the local, if you are in the community where you live, you know most of the people and you know what they do. All right. So for example, if you have a retired nurse or a retired, um, I'll stick to nurse. If you have a retired nurse and you have a medical emergency, you would know that, if you have something that comes up, that would be the person who you would call on to assist in that regard. Okay, we also talked about shelteries fares and the fact that they do come with baggage and some people may act out in different ways, and it's good for you to know that beforehand and to understand at times why people do the things or say the things that they do. Don't take anything personal when you're in a shelter managing it. In terms of shelter administration, we also went over the shelter management team. So in order to manage a shelter, we would assume that 5 people are needed. The shelter manager is the head of the shelter and responsible for the overall management of everything that happens in the shelter. And that shelter manager would have 2 deputies, one in charge of administration, and then there's also a deputy in charge of operations, and then you have the wardens that would support the two. We also went over the COVID-19 procedures and protocols. We talked about the number of people that should be in a small standard classroom, and that number is 10, and they should be socially distanced by family or by individuals coming into your shelter. And this is, of course, to prevent the spread of COVID and to keep everybody safe. Keep you safe as a volunteer, as public officers need to be safe as well. And so those procedures were put into place in 2020 and they're still very relevant. Next, we went through the 4 phases of shelter operations. So there are 4 phases. The first phase is pre-activation. And let me just list them, and then I'll just briefly go through them. I don't want to repeat everything from yesterday, but I do want to touch on some things that maybe some others, because we had that issue yesterday. So we have the 4 stages of shelter operations. The first is the pre-activation stage. We have the activation, secondly, and then we have deactivation, and then lastly, post-activation. All right. So pre-activation deals with preparing the shelter, your plans. How are we? Is everybody trained on my team? Am I trained? Do we know where to go for the keys? Do we have forms? Things like that, preparing. Activation is the actual operation of the shelter. Deactivation would be when the all clear is given and you're, well, I don't want to say when the all clear is given, but it is when everybody would be leaving to go back to their homes, whoever can. Know that after the all clear, you can't just send everybody home, and there is a reason for that. Some people might not be able to access their home. Some people's home might be flooded, and guess what? They would be knocking right back on your shelter door, and they ask for shelter. So it's good to find out, get an idea of what damages are in different areas for, where you have the shelteries. And then the last stage would be post-activation. So that is returning the shelter back to its original form, which would be the classroom setup. So putting it back to the form that you found it, note any damages and the like. And then we also talked about problem-solving techniques. Some of the techniques that you can use in terms of solving problems at your shelter would be to act as a judge, listen to 2 sides of a story, and then you make a decision based on that. Another problem-solving technique that Kenton went over would have been the delay tactic technique. Sometimes you want to deal with the matter now, but we know that sometimes if you just walk away from the situation and you come back, not for too long, you can't walk away from the situation for too long, but just a short delay tactic. Sometimes you come back and you have the answer and you have the solution to the problem. All right, so that's a quick recap of yesterday's session in terms of the shelter management. Anybody have any questions? Next, we're going into the quiz. And then I just know one other problem solving technique that I want to mention as well is that always know that there is help. Don't think that you're there as a shelter management team that you do not have help on the other side. Sometimes within your own shelter you have the help, like we mentioned, drawing on the skills of your shelterees, people that are actually in the shelter. Okay, you can do that. And you also know that in your emergency operations center, you have people that are well trained in different areas, different issues, and you can rely on them if there's anything that you cannot, any problem that you cannot solve. Okay, so these are the review questions.
I think there's still a couple people who are trying to log on. So I don't know if Ronnie is monitoring the chat group.
I am monitoring.
Okay.
Nobody is in the waiting room yet.
When the partner mentioned that when they increase that they are unable to respond via chat, so they will communicate with the WhatsApp for now.
The COROZAL CERT.
Mr. Chris, are you
Nikolai
there?
has
Have you logged in already? I see he's connected, but for some reason he says
doesn't have access to the chat.
Sorry. I'm sorry. What did you say?
All right.
okay, you're connected, Mr. Chris. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Who else? I see that Miss Wendy, Miss Wendy Carter.
Nikolai Alvarado.
Miss Wendy Carter. Okay, she's here with me. Okay. And
Yes,
Nick.
I'm here too.
Okay, okay, Miss Wendy. And Nikolai Alvarado. Nicole. Okay, I guess Miss have problems. Okay, I'll be sending in a personal message to her. No problem. Go proceed, Renice, right?
Yeah, I know this is the second session that Nikolai hasn't been able to get into, so hopefully we'll figure that out. All right, guys. And everybody notices the ground rules. You have options of answering these questions. We have the WhatsApp chat. We have this chat. Or if you don't want to type, just take off your microphone and go right ahead. Go right at it. So the review questions are 3. And so the first question is or statement is to list 3 important responsibilities of a shelter manager. We had mentioned that a shelter manager is being a shelter manager. You know, it's a very senior position, and it's not just it's not given to anybody. Usually, you would have had you would be a senior person in your community. You know how to lead people. I see that Jesse Aldana's hand is up. Jesse, you can go ahead.
I can give it a try. Register the
Yes,
people
go
as
ahead.
they arrive. Register the people as they arrive and leave. Operate the radio to communicate what is happening there at the shelter. And make sure that there's water and food for the
Okay.
persons who are staying at the shelter.
Yes, you're correct. Those are some of the responsibilities of a shelter manager. The shelter manager, him or herself, would not be directly responsible to register everybody as they arrive, but they would be overseeing and making sure that somebody, a registrar, is there to fill out the forms and make sure that each person entering their shelter is well documented. So correct. You were 100% correct. I don't know if anybody wants to get a shot at it, but
Excuse me, Renice.
we will.
It's
I'm
Wendy
sorry?
Carter. Did show the WhatsApp
Wendy?
group. She said, put together a
Okay.
schedule for people, delegate responsibilities, delegate areas for different needs.
Okay, that is perfect.
And
Yeah,
Bibiani
you
Yam,
guys did it.
Bibiani Yam responded, ensure a safety, provide supervision, maintenance, everything, which is also correct.
All right. Good, good guys. Thank you. List 3 important areas in a shelter. You know, when you get into a shelter, you want face one. At times, you may face just one big open space. All right. You need to figure out how you want to divide up the space and how will you know, allocate different spacing within the shelter for different purposes. And so we went over, you know, you need to have this set up, you need to have this other situation set up. And so we're asking to list 3 most important areas in a shelter. Ronnie, I don't know if it would be helpful to have the question slide up, the previous slide. Thank you. And also if you could get that video ready for us, that EOC video ready. All right. I see a lot of people typing, so let's see.
For the video, I would have to stop sharing the screen and then I would project it.
Okay. All right. That's fine. That's just to give you a heads up because for some reason, I can't like when you're more tech savvy than I am. Last time I tried it, it just showed the video. It didn't have the audio, so I will learn a thing or two from you tonight. So guys, if anybody wanna turn off their microphone and just shoot some ideas out there, and then we can all assist and discuss. So three most important areas in a shelter. Okay, you walk into a shelter, big open space. You've never been to this building before, but from the shelter management training that you receive that such and such needs to be set up. This other area needs to be set up. We
We
can
have
all answer this together.
Wendy Carter says check-in, kids area, medical area.
Say it again, kids area and
Check-in area, kids area, medical area.
those are two. Um, for kids in your shelter that are maybe they can't keep still or whatever, you want to create child-friendly spaces. I know a lot of municipalities are encouraging this through UNICEF, where you're creating a child-friendly space using the resources that you have. Um, the other one was what? I'm sorry, I just had it on my tongue and I
Medical area.
which other one did you mention? Medical, yes, correct. That is very important, being that we're in this COVID-19 pandemic. So, with COVID-19, you want to make sure that you're asking screening questions. Do you have COVID-19? And if they do, on the shelter form, that form has been updated. And so that is one of the first questions that you often ask. And if the answer is yes, further action is required, and you would separate that person, put them in the empty classroom that you would have had allocated for that purpose. All right, so that's two. Anybody could tell me one more important area in a shelter. I'll give you some hints. So people in your shelter have to eat and drink water. You would be getting supplies as well from your EOC, from the different warehouses. And just let me mention this. I don't think we have it anywhere in this training sessions, but NEMA has 5 warehouses strategically located countrywide. The nearest warehouse to COROZAL would be in Orange Walk. All right. I see Felipe's hand is up. So we have 5 warehouses. We have one down south in PG at Machaca. There's one in Corozal. There's one in Belmopan. We have one in Ladyville and one in Independence Village. But these warehouses are there to provide, relief supplies. We have food, water, and the like, mattresses, bedding, and the like in those shelters. So, say for example, you get food and water. Where are you going to put these? But I don't want to give you the answer. I see Felipe's hand is up. Let me shut up. Felipe, go ahead.
Actually, the restroom is one, and also security area. For those that are behaving bad or can behave bad.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you want to have a security area set up. And one of the reasons for that is that you want to be checking people's luggage when they come in at your shelter. Not luggage, but their stuff. You don't want to have weapons being snuck in. There are some items that are prohibited from shelters. And so this security area can be set up where, before they bring in their stuff, you check their belongings to make sure that they're not bringing in knives, weapons. People like smuggling vodka, like in a water bottle, or they might trick you in a different ways that might create problems for you in the shelter. So it's good to have one security or maybe one lead detention area. Okay. So moving on to the last question. So we have we have the shelter operations phases, which I just mentioned. So which is the most important shelter operation phase, in your opinion, and why? And we could just have maybe one person answer this question. Okay, I see that somebody answered the previous question in the chat. Waiting room, food and beverages, and department sanitation area. Yeah, oh, I want to mention that yes, this is what I was trying to hint at. You will be getting supplies, food and water. You don't want you want to be able to put that in a safe area so that people don't have free access to the food and the water. So that should be there should be a little storage section for that. Wendy Carter mentioned that the pre-activation phase is the most important shelter operations phase. Let us know why, Wendy. Let us know why you think that the pre-activation phase is the most important phase to you. All right, we see that Nikolai Alvarado actually joined. He got in. Good job, Ronnie. Whatever
Welcome.
magic you did work. All right, so I have an acceptable, a very correct answer, so we'll go ahead. When this says the pre-activation stage is the most important shelter operations phase, because if there's no prep stage, everything else is harder, and that is true. If people are not trained, if people don't know what to do, if even the shelterees don't know how to prepare themselves before they go to a shelter, it can be a very bad situation. All right, so I'll go ahead and we can move on to the next slide. Good job, guys. I thank you so much, and I know that Kenton did a good job yesterday explaining everything in detail. I know somebody mentioned last night in the chat that they liked how he went into the child safety section in detail. We're glad that this was very useful to you. Okay, so the aim of today's training is to communicate, is this. So communicating with the EOC or the Emergency Operations Center is vital to effective operations in order to save lives and to ensure the continuity in the aftermath of a disaster. So tonight's module seeks to just give you a general overview of how EOCs operate. All right, you may not be in an actual EOC, but you do need to know how EOCs operate in order to communicate with them. As a whole, emergency management is the process of coordinating available resources to deal with emergencies in order to save lives and avoid injury and the like. So you on the ground as a CERT would be communicating with your emergency operations center. I'm hearing a feedback. So anyways, let's start with a video. We have a 5 minutes video that we want to start with, and then we'll move into the information.
Okay.
So guys, this is in a I hope you can hear me. Yeah. This is in a health context, but it's the same basic principles that apply to how EOCs are run. Let me turn off my microphone.
I'll just play it for like 3 seconds and you guys tell me if you can hear it.
Yes. Yes.
Can it be heard? Yes? Okay, thank you very much.
When an emergency occurs, it's too late to start planning a response. How do you plan for the unexpected? The first 48 hours is critical. Whether it's stopping a disease outbreak or preventing injury and death, you have to start to plan before the emergency occurs. And when it hits, act fast. The ability of your emergency response plan to sustain and succeed in any emergency is dependent on the strength and depth of its roots. A clearly defined chain of command and organizational structure, effective resource management, and advanced planning are important aspects of an emergency response. An incident management system, or IMS, is an internationally recognized model based on these principles. IMS provides the root structure needed to grow your emergency response plan and make it strong enough to withstand natural disasters, disease outbreaks, or any hazard. An Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, is the place from which you run your incident management system. The EOC is where you collect information, make decisions about priorities, and coordinate action and communication. EOCs can expand as the response unfolds and scale down as the emergency is under control. EOCs can be big or small, complex or simple, implemented just as effectively in rural as in urban settings. EOCs are necessary and achievable. Simply put, an EOC and any function within it is people, systems, and things. And of the three, the people and systems are the most important elements. For example, you have some people doing contact tracing, others to analyze the data that's collected. You have systems that detail how and when contact tracing is conducted and how the information is shared during staff meetings. And you have things such as trucks or cars that contact tracing staff use to get around, the personal protective gear they may wear when talking to people within a home, and the printers used to transmit the data back to the EOC. Incident management systems implemented as part of an emergency operations center follow an established structure. Following this structure, you can move quickly from planning to using your EOC, which is the key to being effective in your response. There are 5 basic steps to help get your EOC set up and ready to use. With that in mind, first, ensure that you have the laws and authorities in place to carry out public health emergency activities. Second, identify the personnel who represent the major functions for your area or across areas, including in particular rapid response teams, which can be deployed as needed to particular areas. These teams can be comprised of epidemiologists or disease surveillance specialists, laboratorians, and others, depending on the needs and scope of the mission. Third, identify a location, which may depend on the size of your response or the space you have available to you. And build out, whether it be from a warehouse or as simple as a storage cabinet, whatever infrastructure is needed, such as computer networks and secure communication equipment, as well as transportation. Fourth, use existing training resources, such as the World Health Organization's Framework for Public Health Emergency Operations Centers, or trainers from CDC to develop standard operating procedures or systems to run your operation. Then, train on a routine basis, using exercises for various scenarios to keep skills and familiarity with systems routine, so that when the time comes to activate the EOC, staff can quickly move into action. Making use of the experiences and lessons learned to correct and customize plans and SOPs, filling gaps where needed. What an EOC does is make sure that all the various activities and stakeholders affected by outbreaks and emergencies work in sync. Making sure that information and data are shared efficiently and quickly in a coordinated manner. Communicating essential information to partners and stakeholders. Having an EOC structure in place as part of a country's incident management system provides an invaluable head start in heading off a public health disaster. For example, in Nigeria, the country was able to utilize resources devoted to another EOC, one focused on polio, and quickly bring together skilled public health personnel under an EOC devoted to the Ebola outbreak. This allowed teams and stakeholders to interface quickly and efficiently, preventing isolation of individual response elements. For example, staff conducting contact tracing upon identifying a symptomatic contact would call into the EOC, and a case management team, ambulance, and decontamination team would be deployed, getting the patient quickly into isolation while the contact tracing team moved to list new and existing contacts of the affected individual. This type of rapid response and coordinated action played a critical role in containing Ebola's spread, even among the densely populated areas of Nigeria. CDC is committed to providing training for those who want to establish an EOC. The investment can be minimal. The benefits are priceless.
Okay, thanks. So guys, that's just to give you a general overview and general idea as to how EOCs are set up and how they're run. Usually, they're there to coordinate resources before, during, or after an emergency. And so this is where all the decision makers, the leaders in a community, in a district, in a village, nationally, this is where they all come together. It can either be in a physical office space, or it can be in a meeting situation. It can also be virtually. So this is where decisions are made and resources are allocated, okay? So moving on to the presentation. I hope the video will help at the end in piecing everything together. All right, so this, I'm sure you've seen this before, and I just want to remind you of how the system is set up. So we have the national committees, the 15 national committees, and then at the district level, we have representation from almost all 15 of the committees. And the reason I say that is because two committees, maybe about, and Kenton can help me with this, the Foreign Assistance Committee at the district or at the village level would not need representation just because of their specific function. So maybe at the district level, you'll have representation from maybe about 13 committees, all right? And these include every single function that is needed in emergency management, all right? And so you fit here into the COROZAL Emergency Committee, which is in the city, right, Ronnie? Your EOC is located where? At the office or somewhere else? At the town council?
Our EOC is located not far from Mr. Carter and Miss Wendy, number 24, Custard Apple Streets in Santa Rita, still COROZAL. town. It's not far from COROZAL town.
Okay. And that is your primary emergency operations center.
That is right.
And where is your alternate, just in
Alternate
case something happens to that one?
IT vet. IT vet,
IT.
which is Santa Rita Heights.
Okay. All right. So you guys know at the district level, that's where your emergency operation centers are physically located. The other slide, again, reminder, and we went over this previously, would be the 15 national committees. All right. The next slide. Go ahead and switch it for me, Ronnie, please. The next slide. All right. So again, reminder, in COROZAL district, you should have somebody listed on, somebody senior that can make decisions from previous slide. You skip me just now.
Is it that one?
So yes, thank you. So in your COROZAL emergency committee, somebody should be sitting there representing education, information, communication, and warning. So that committee is responsible for getting the message out to people. All right. For example, if there's a tsunami coming, this is a committee that would be responsible for getting that message out to everybody, using whatever resources they have, whatever connections, communicating with everybody at the village level, everybody who would be possibly affected. You have somebody who can make decisions representing the medical care and public health committee. You got transport and evacuation, search and rescue, all right? And so the list goes on. And I just wanted to put that fresh in your memory because, you know, we will get into that a little bit more. So with the next, well, I'll hand over the floor to Ronnie. Ronnie will be going over EOCs, defining it and going over the functions and the responsibilities of emergency operation centers. So Ronnie, you have the mic.
Thank you very much, Renise. So yeah, today we'll be talking about emergency operations centers, which in military terms we may know them as command centers. And of course, an EOC is the physical location where staff from multiple agencies, either public or private, come together during an emergency to coordinate response and recovery actions and resources. As Renise mentioned, we do have an EOC in COROZAL, which is the number 24 Custard Apple, right behind Mahil's Mexican product in Santa Rita. And that is our first EOC center. And as she mentioned, and it is something note to take, food for thought, that we do have an alternate EOC command center, which would be located at Santa Rita Heights IT Vet. And we, as we might be going into the in-depth into the slides, you will notice why that certain location. So these centers may alternatively be called command centers, as I mentioned in military terms, situation rooms, war rooms, crisis management centers, or other similar terms. Here in COROZAL, we also do have other EOCs. For example, we have EOCs in the Red Cross. We have Rotary having their own EOC. And for example, in Rotary, they use conference rooms. And regardless of the term, this is where the coordination of information and resources take place, what we call the action place. I did a video for you guys so you can see the EOC Center in Santa Rita, which is the first EOC we have. So let me stop presenting and show you the video. Okay, I'll be playing it right now, and you guys tell me if you can hear.
This is an example of how the EOC is formed in COROZAL, what it should look like.
Can you guys hear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, we're hearing.
Yes,
This is
yes, we can hear.
okay.
Yes,
Renice
sir.
and Kenton might be known to this place in COROZAL. This is where our Emergency Operation Command Center is. To play.
This is where the members actually sit down from the different committee. And here is where we have our meetings. As you can see, it has a kitchen, you know. You might have a dress area, you know, from different activities that you might be going. Probably you should have a raincoat there. Raincoat is there, you know, just in case you will be needing to come out in the rain. You have television, computers, you know, to see the news, the different village emergency committee information. And as you can see, the whiteboards have structured their respective committee where the information will be written down, and then all of us can see it. And we have our tracking chart, you know, using GIS, Geographical Information System. We should have always our tracking chart to check out the hurricanes and the direction.
So yes, guys, that is the EOC in COROZAL. And the alternate one, well, I think everybody knows the IT vet, where the IT vet is located, is the high school. And let me get back to the presentation. Okay, I think I might have came out from the presentation. I'll just log back in. Okay. There you go. So that is the Emergency Operations Committee Center. Okay, let me add somebody else has joined us. Gonzalo, admit. Okay. So this is what it looks in Belmopan. As Renice mentioned, we have the national, we have the district, and we have the village level. And of course, we have the one in COROZAL, where we do meet up every once a month, every last Wednesday of the month. We do reunite, and you know, we have to stick to the new norm, which is technology. At the moment, we are connecting to these platforms. We use Meet, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams. As you can see on the left-hand corner, we have Belmopan, which is the national level, which is activated. We have Toledo, where is Mr. Kenton Param area, this southern area. And we have San Pedro, which is part of the central, which is the island itself. And that is what it looks like. So the village level have their EOC also from their volunteers, Red Cross, people that are from the council, you know, and these persons take the information to the district level, and the district level EOC sends it to the national EOC level. So that is how it works. Now, the purpose of an emergency operation committee, the purpose is to provide a safe and functional space, physically or virtually, like I mentioned, to coordinate emergency disaster response and recovery efforts. We should collect, analyze, and share the information. Like I mentioned, it is very crucial to have information, you know, being shared out from the village, district, and national in order to get a feedback. Support resources, needs, and requests. And the mandate must be to anticipate, we respond, we recover, and these are the terms that, you know, we should anticipate. For example, right now we're doing this training, we anticipate, we prepare, we do community outreach, we prepare with village emergency committee level, we train people for damage assessment, needs and analysis, search and rescue, relief and supplies management committee, and COBO app, utilizing all these applications and the trainings, you know. And we respond in during times of activation. We do have an formation out there, you know, either it be a typhoon, a tropical storm, or a small flooding, 3, 4, 5 days rain. You know, we have areas in COROZAL where it is flood prone areas such as Chula Vista or Libertad. We have to respond to that. We recover, and that is where the training takes place. And for example, this community emergency response team, we're training you guys as to when it's time to recover. You know, we have our teams being deployed. For example, damage assessment, needs and analysis goes out, relief and supplies management committee, and some of the CERTs. Availability of additional staff cannot be emphasized enough. All operations must be supervised, implemented, and managed from the EOC. So meaning there must be a head. For example, in our EOC, we have a chairperson, we have a director, and we have the coordinator and the regional coordinator that, you know, supervise, implement, and manage these different committees, the 15 operational committees. And in the village level, of course, we have volunteers, volunteers from church, people from Red Cross, you know, retired officers, nurses, etc. Now, the functions of an EOC is to establish priorities for the affected, needy, critical lifelines, facilities, infrastructure, coordination of diplomatic arrangements. You know, we are trained as when it comes to this emergency operation committee of how to make come up with solutions, make decisions, wise decisions. We also direct what needs to be done. You know, if you are a leader, you must act like a leader to do decisions. You know, at the end of the day, we are there to save life and property, coordinate relief efforts between the public and the private sector. So I'd just like to mention this you know, it is something very good to bring about. You know, whenever I go to my village emergency committee, I stress it that in Nemo, we do not place politics, race, or religion. We just are not there for the government areas, you know, just for people because, you know, because of the different levels of, or probably because you're from a suburb area or a rural area. No, everybody will get the assistance if you're affected. So this comes about with when it entails that between the public and private sector, we also include business in there. You know, we have business people that are close to Nemo. When it comes to the activation, they will be getting on. Well, some of them help us and they do get the assistance from us. Control assets and manage resource needs. So that is the functions of the Emergency Operation Committee. My colleague Kenton will be tagging in this one, but right before he tags in, I would show in the later on videos a video of how the Emergency Operation Committee operates in the COROZAL district. So I'll be just projecting it after some slides after Mr. Kenton. Mr. Kenton, are you there with us? Any questions from you guys too also? Doubts?
I noticed that we have a pretty full house tonight. I want to remind you guys that we really appreciate your time and your effort tonight to be in this session. Yeah, I just needed to say that. And Renee, I like the tour of the EOC. It really gives perspective, and I enjoyed that.
All right. Good night, everybody. I will be with you for a couple slides. Good job on the presentation, Renice and Ronnie. If you can go back to the slide you were. Yeah, I'll pick up from there as well. Does this, so I know Miss Renice like to do reviews, so this is a good slide. It highlights the main functions of the EOC. So if you would remember them on establish priorities, direct, this is operations, coordinate the operations, and control assets and manage resources. So in summing it up, as basic as I can, an EOC is where you have command and control. So that's the simplest term I can use to describe an EOC, the place where you have command and control. All right, Ronnie, let's recap. What are some factors that you must consider when selecting an EOC? All right. You need to ensure that your EOC is safe, in a safe location, because you need to ensure that the members that are working out of that command center is not in a vulnerable situation, right? We need to be able to ensure that it's a functional space. And you saw in the video that Ronnie showed an operations room with all the status board around the room for each committee. You saw a kitchen. I even saw a lead changing room, I think you had, right? So it has to be functional, right? Ideally, you want all of these things that when you get there, because people in the EOC will be spending long hours in the EOC, right? And you would sleep there, you will eat there, you will shower there, you will work there for a period of time. That is what an EOC is designed to accommodate in a real crisis situation, right? So next slide. So all these factors are considered when setting up an emergency operations center, a place where you have command and control to manage the crisis, manage the incident, with operational teams out in the field, such as CERT, such as search and rescue, damage assessment teams, and so forth. It's a place where everything comes together, right? And directives flow from, right? Information flowing in and out of an EOC, flowing in from situations that are occurring and from teams such as yourself, CERT, back into the EOC, and then that flowing back out to you and up to the national level, right? So in locating the EOC, we have to consider hazards, right? We have to ensure that it is fire safety for an EOC. So more than likely, if you walk around an EOC, you didn't see it in Ronnie's video, but I'm sure somewhere there's a fire extinguisher, right? We have to consider the impacts of wind for an EOC. An EOC can be activated for a number of different scenarios, right? The video that Ms. Ogales showed earlier was for a health situation, a health crisis, something like a COVID management area, right? One of the main ones for us is hurricanes and floods. And so we have the EOC that you're using for a hurricane have to be able to withstand a certain category of winds, right? And that is one of the reasons why we have an alternate, right? Because if for some reason your EOC become compromised and things happen, right, then you need to be able to move to somewhere else and function as well, because you still have to manage a crisis, right? So these are some of the hazards that the EOC should consider insuring itself against. And also these are the hazards that the EOC manage, right? So we can't manage a situation if we are just as vulnerable as the areas that are being impacted. So we have to ensure that we are safe from these hazards so that we can be able to manage the impacts of these hazards as it impacts the communities and our district and country, right? Very important things to consider in an EOC is communication, accessibility, and we talk about safety and security. So we can't have an EOC that is not accessible, and so the location that is considered is to ensure that it's a safe location, is one that can be easily reached, right? And manage traffic from and control, right? Communication is, they said, the lifeblood of any emergency operation center, because if you can't communicate, if you can't talk to people, you can't manage the crisis, you can't manage the situation, you don't know what is going on, you can't receive information, and you can't send out information. So that is essential. And in an EOC, you would find a communication section or a communication room. That is a part of your EOC layout as well. Right? Next slide. Not sure if Ronnie is there.
That's his.
All right, you don't switch.
Okay.
All right, designing the EOC. An EOC can be set up in any existing building. Once you have a building that is structurally sound and it is functional, you can use it as an EOC, right? You can move from one space to the next. There's purpose-built emergency operations center, and then there's buildings that we just utilize. But the key thing is for us to have some of these amenities in there, right? And that's why we're going through these slides. I think there's only 2 purpose-built emergency operations center in the country, one at the national level and one, I'm happy to say, in Toledo district for us, right? So those were purpose-built for as an emergency operations center. And I'm sure COROZAL and different parts of the country will get their purpose-built EOC in due time. But it can be any building that offers the safety of the occupants and is functional, right? It has to be functional. Can't have an EOC where you can't take a shower or can't eat or that kind of thing, right? And you need an and don't have communications and so forth. So you need to ensure that these things are present or can be set up within that EOC, because you could set up a kitchen very easily. You know, you can set up a kitchen and start to prepare meals. You need somewhere where you you need, for sanitization purposes and for comfort, bathroom facilities with showers and the like. You also need a place where you can take your power nap or sleep for a couple hours. And so that has to be crafted out in your building as well, right? So the layout must consider these things. So you need to have an idea of how the building is situated so you can sketch that out, right? You need to consider the staff requirements that you will be necessary in that emergency operation center, from the director, operations officer, chairpersons of different committee or lead personnel for different agencies who have different scope and responsibility in the disaster management. You need secretaries, you need communication persons, you need diarists, and you need cooks, you need people who will clean, and do some admin stuff. So you need to consider all of these staff requirements for a fully functional emergency operations center, and to deal with that, right? It's a place where everybody is coming together. So for one common purpose, and that is to manage the crisis and to have control of it, right? And so you say forget territorial interest. I guess they're speaking to, you have to, when you're working in an EOC, you're a team. So it's not just you alone, and you need to consider what it means to working with other people. You have to be a team player, right? And not only be looking out for yourself, but looking out for the interests of everybody in that building, as you're in it together, right? Especially if you're locked down. So you need to design it to cope with external and internal emergencies that I alluded to already, right? So the EOC need to be able to withstand the threat that is in the area and coming, and it also needs to be able to cater for emergencies and to anticipate emergencies that can occur within your building and your area and your EOC as well. So you have to be prepared for that. And that is one of the reasons, again, we have an alternate in case it becomes compromised. Right? All right. Equipment. Some of the equipment required for an effective functioning EOC, telephone, I have fax. I can't remember last time I see anybody have a fax. I don't know if that's obsolete nowadays with all the technology, but telephone for sure. Definitely a VHF radio, because we can anticipate, and this communication system is set up. Remember, one of the things Ronnie went over is to anticipate, right? We have to anticipate that communication will go down at some point in time, and so we have to make provisions for that. And so VHF radio communication network must be available at an emergency operations center, right? So if all the communication go down countrywide, NEMO will still be able to talk between the districts and up to the national level, and in some of our districts to some of our most remote communities where we have radios installed. And it's a growing network of VHF radios. So hopefully we can be able to communicate everywhere in the country, back into a district operation center and up to the national in the event that it goes down, right? One incident I can remember was a 2009 earthquake where communication just went down. As soon as the earthquake happened, everybody was on their cell phone trying to call your loved ones or people you're concerned about, and so the whole system crashed, right? And so for us at NEMO, we couldn't even communicate because then we had we're relying on cell phones for the most part, and so we can anticipate such incident to occur in a major impact at some point in time where electrical lines go down, telephone lines go down, and this kind of thing. And so an emergency, a disaster response, preparedness and response agency have to consider these things, and it has to be consider the communication network within an EOC. AM, FM radios, because we do a lot of public announcement and bulletins and advisories, and so it's good to know what is happening and listening, and also for people to call in. A lot of people call on the radio when for whatever reason they can't get to the appropriate agency or to NEMO, and they would send messages over the radio, and we would hear it, and then we would try to verify the incident and then respond. Right? Cell phones, pretty much everybody have one of those, so it makes communication easy where there is that network. A backup generator is absolutely necessary, and I'm sure that there is no established district emergency operation center without a backup generator. The COROZAL, from COROZAL to Toledo, right? Computers and copier scanners is necessary to manage the crisis, because they help to manage the information that is coming in and out, and also serve as a communication tool as well, where email and the like. Again, along with AM, FM radio, a cable TV to monitor through news agencies what is also happening on the ground. So we utilize whatever means is available in an EOC to be able to see what is happening out in the communities on the ground and be able to communicate with them. So whatever system or whatever network is there available, we will use that, right? Maps, as you saw in Ronnie's video, there's two, if you walk into any EOC, there's two things you will see on the wall. One is a tracking chart that tracks the storm, and one is a map of your area responsibility. So you will see in the COROZAL one, a map of COROZAL with all the different district towns and villages and so forth, right? And if you come to the Toledo one, you will see the tracking chart, and you will see the map of the Toledo district, right? Absolutely. Considering things can happen within the EOC, remember we need to prepare for external and internal situations or threat that can happen, right? And so a first aid kit is a must within the Emergency Operations Center. Fire extinguishers will be up all night, so definitely a coffee maker will be good, right? Microwave, refrigerator, and this is the kitchen side of things, right? The feeding side of things, right? You have to be prepared to be able to prepare and provide meals within the same building. So everything is self-contained, if you will, within that Emergency Operations Center. When you go there, you should have everything you really need to function and for a number of days, right? Beds, cots, sleeping area or sleeping bays, sleeping rooms, right? And additional lighting, right? Battery or solar lighting or some sort of things like that. Kerosene lamp, we I know it's on here, but it's one of the things we try to move away from because it's a fire hazard. So we're looking into more stuff like as we progress and as we grow into more stuff like backup generators for lighting and also solar, some kind of solar lighting, emergency lighting when the power go off, it comes on because it's charged up, that kind of thing. Okay, I'm gonna cover tracking chart. Slide. As I'm going along, you guys can input, remember, right, or ask questions, right? Communications, I stressed on communications. It's absolutely important. Like I said, it's for me, it's a lifeblood of an operations, of an EOC. This is and communications coming in and going out, okay, in all forms. So communication is essential. So there is that network of communication. Right? The EOC is described as a nerve center, the place where you have command and control. So it's the brain part of the whole operation, the brain of the whole operation. And this is where you have all the technical people and expertise around the table, trying to respond with the different with the different solutions that we've already more than likely anticipated and worked through solutions for. And so it's just a matter of responding and being operational and having teams that CERT can be a part of out on the ground doing their thing. Okay. Again, survivability and operability. The EOC must be able to survive the effects that we talked about that already, right? From the hazard it was designed to withstand. So I see all the hazard that was listed in the earlier slide that we have to respond to. We have to be able to withstand those hazards as well, right? Consider the alternate location like we mentioned, and if you must move, if there's an alternate that we already select, we have to be able to move within a certain period of time and move with the necessary equipment and amenities that we will need to function and survive in that other location, right? So that has to be considered as well. So what are the crisis situations that can happen within an incident is the EOC itself being compromised, and we have to respond to that. So the EOC have to respond to themselves being compromised. A floor plan or a sketch of the EOC is required for planning the layout. And this is thought out before an incident, right? So you generally would know your primary location that is already set up that you saw in the video, and then your alternate location. So you have a plan and an SOP as to how we will move from one building to the next, who will do what, when, and that kind of thing. So a sketch is kind of the map of how you want that to happen, how it will lay out. So everything just doesn't get into the building and get piled up, and then we have to figure out what is going on, right? It goes right into the building, right into its proper place, the fridge, the microwave, whatever, the computers, the desk, the radio communication, equipment, and all of that, right? The plan should be a part of the standard operating procedures in the event that the EOC does become compromised. I think I have to consider that. There should be a minimum interference between the operations and the admin group, right? This means you see if you remember the room that you saw the whiteboards hanging, that would be the operations room, and that is the room where people, if you're in that room, it's because you're in there to respond to some situation that is occurring. You're either dealing with shelters, you're either probably dealing with evacuation, dealing with the movement of relief supplies, and all of this can be happening at the same time because you have different committees sitting down in that room coordinating all of that at the same time. So an EOC might be responding to a number of different scenarios and incidents at the same time in that operations room, right? And then you have the admin staff of the EOC, where in a different section, and you don't want them tripping over each other and interfering. And so they're there to support the operations, and from the logistics of providing meals to the sanitization of the emergency operation center. So the admin group takes care of all of that logistical legwork. So if you're there figuring out an incident, say we lost a boat, say for instance, coming in off the keys or whatever, and you're trying to deal with that, and then you're trying to think about what you'll eat, and or is the food ready, or is it being prepared. You don't want to have those kind of conflicting things, so you have that division of labor, if you will, and that different focus areas for different members of staff within the EOC, so that you have a smooth operation, and a functional space that you can deal with the crisis at hand, right? So you generally it's public officers working in the EOC, but there are times when it is supported also by volunteers. So depending on your location where you're at, don't be surprised if you end up being a volunteer in the emergency operations center somewhere as CERT members, all right? Consider in the design of the EOC to consider the different focus areas for the different people working in the EOC. So you have minimum interference between the different groups, right? You again, like say for instance, your radio communication network system, you don't want it right in the operations room, because those things are loud when people are talking back and forth, right? And it's a distraction sometimes. So you want your own area that you can minimize that sound level if possible. It's not always ideal. You have to work with what you got, but you consider some of these things, the way you lay out the EOC, right? So that it becomes as best as possible a functional space with minimal interference. Not to say that you won't have any, but at least you minimize it as best as possible. All right, slide. Part of moving the EOC will take a lot of logistical support, and a way for CERT members to serve is to be able to assist with the movement and setting up of an emergency operations center. And having this training will help you to think through that process as well. And so this is how you can function as well as a support. Because remember, while we're moving, we still have to be dealing with incidents that will be coming in. So the officers sitting down in that EOC trying to figure out stuff, it will be a tremendous support and help if you have a group of people that's just like the admin staff, a group of people that is able to move and relocate the EOC. Meeting and briefing area, if it is possible. Sometimes in the past, when we had our tiny little building in Toledo and PG as an EOC, we had to use one room for basically operations and briefing sometimes and meeting. But ideally, you want your briefing area to be a separated area from your operations room, right? And your admin area. And there's a reason for that, because while you have incidents that are ongoing that you have to be working on, that can be carried. You can continue with that task while a briefing is happening for other members in another area for another incident, that kind of thing. So again, you minimize that distraction and you minimize that interference. So space layout should consider that. Of course, we talk about the kitchen area. Bathroom is a must. You cannot function, an EOC cannot function without a proper bathroom. So that is one of the main things that we need to look at. If a building does not have that, then it's not suitable for an emergency operation center. If the hazard you're responding to is something like a hurricane, where you have to be locked down in that particular building, right? Accommodation, and that speaks to, again, sleeping and resting area, right? Generally, you want to set up your EOC where your committee is near their what we call the status board, so that they can, won't have to be running across the room to write something on the status board. You just get up, maybe turn behind you or beside you, and you write what is on there. Status board serve a very important function because it helps you to track the incidents that are happening, and also for reporting. It helps to track the information coming in, going out, the incidents that are occurring, where staff is, where teams are at, and that kind of thing, where the vehicle is at. And after it gets full, you record it and then you erase it, start over again. So if you would walk into my EOC in Toledo, you will still see my status board full of a lot of information. We don't take them off until another incident occur. So you should be able to walk into an operations room within the EOC, read those status board, and have a fairly good picture of what the operation is like for that incident, because you will see the activity that each committee is engaging in on their status board. Right? Very important. So if you not got a whiteboard, you could use white paper. You have to improvise at times, right? Plan for the future, build redundancy for communication. So like I explained, whatever mechanism is out there for communication, we will use it, whether it's radio, TV, definitely VHF, phone, WhatsApp, whatever way we can communicate. So that redundancy is there in terms of communication. Again, I say it's kind of like the lifeblood of the operations, EOC. Unavailability of staff, power outages, we have a plan for these things. They will happen. Sometimes people who are supposed to show up don't show up for whatever reason, or some don't show up because they, at the time you activate your EOC, there just wasn't in a particular district. People move, people travel, and there are times when, maybe for a rapid onset event such as a tsunami or earthquake, you have to activate immediately. So staff won't be readily available, and this is where we tap into other personnel that can assist, including sometimes volunteers and CERT. Consider security for access. Post a guard at the door. An EOC must be a safe place, right? So when you get in there, you shouldn't be worrying about your safety, right? That is from the hazard, and nowadays from other crime situation, right? And so whenever you activate, a police officer should be at your EOC, right? And they control the main entrance to help you. So nobody should come into your EOC without permission. Even if somebody coming, even some may say like the media would come into your EOC, they just don't have free reign of your EOC. We don't hide anything, but there's a media room or a briefing area that the media will have access to when we have scheduled planned briefing, right? And so we have to have that kind of command and that kind of control over the operations. So anybody accessing your EOC that is not a staff of your EOC would have to maybe get like a visitor's pass, and that would have to be approved from the director of the EOC or the operations. All right. These are some of the staff appointment, the director, which has control of the emergency operations center, any of the incident that is being hammered out in the building, working between different committees and bringing them together to work on a different incident. The director is responsible for ensuring that the information coming into the EOC is passed on to the proper committees, and that is being managed and being responded to. The deputy director is also present and dealing with future operations. That the divisional labor could be different, and the way how you set up the EOC, but you always have a director, you always have a deputy director. A liaison officer between for the different agencies or different committees with responsibility. Remember the first slide we went over the first day with Ms. Ogales with all the 15 different committees, and this is what it is speaking to. So each, for a full activation, you will have all of those members present, or a representative from each committee, not the whole committee, because the EOC will be too crowded. And so those committees will go on a shift system, and the liaison officer will hand over to their deputy within that committee, and then another EOC officer and they go on that rotation, right? Main events coordinator or map marker, somebody that is tracking the maps and helping to coordinate the main events that we are responding to, whether it be an evacuation, the opening of shelters, the transportation of goods, the responding maybe to an incident that requires search and rescue. These are main events. So this person will help the operations officer and the director to be able to coordinate and track the information coming out coming in and out, going out of the EOC in regards to all these different scenarios, right? One of the exercises you do is a tabletop exercise for EOC, and it'd be good maybe, I think, I believe that might be a part of the practical that you will be involved with when we do the face-to-face. Communications officer. So we normally would have a couple people for this, and this is for the radio and the phones, right? And the diaries and secretaries would also be nearby the communications officer. They work as a team so that they can record everything coming into the EOC in the logbook, and then get that information to the director, and then the director from there disseminate that to the appropriate committees who need to respond. So if it's a shelter situation, it goes to the housing and shelter committee chairperson or representative, and if it requires other committees to coordinate along with that person, then the director and the main events coordinator ensure that happens. Because if you're dealing with shelter, you might need transportation, right? If you're dealing with shelter, you might need relief supplies as well, if you're at the stage where you're talking about feeding people, right? Public relations, there's one designated person, normally the coordinator, in our system, in our way we function, that would, or somebody from the education and communication and warning, that would be the main person to engage the media and to disseminate information. And that's because we want to ensure that whatever we're saying out there to the public is coordinated and don't cause confusion, right? And one of the things we always say when we do training or any kind of public outreach is for people to listen to the official release from NEMO, right? And because there will be a lot of commentators on the airwaves talking about a lot of different scenario and situation, right? And you want to respond to the official NEMO releases, bulletins, and so forth, right? Information communication manager to again, manage the communication coming in and out, and ensuring that we're verifying and dealing with the incident as it relates to communication and information, right? The message handlers are a part of that team. An administrative admin coordinator, again, to help to deal with some of the logistics and the general needs of the staff within the EOC, whether they need support with equipment, or the preparation of meals and that kind of thing. All right, look like we'll get a break. And right after that, I think Ronnie is coming back.
I am here.
Okay. So you want to give? I still got a break on the schedule. So what you want to give them that break?
Yeah.
How
Make
long?
break. Stretch up, you know.
Stretch, drink of water, whatever.
Body break, you know.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
it was, yeah.
Guys, can we use this break to take the group picture right quick?
Sure. After I stretch.
okay. Let me
It takes a few
up.
seconds.
So I guess everybody needs to turn on the camera.
Okay, just give me a moment so I prepare. Somebody logged in right now, Mr. Felipe Fabro. Okay, right now I'm gonna admit you in. Okay, admitted. Full screen mode. Okay, you can guys. Okay. In the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Say cheese. Okay, good. Thank you. So, how many minutes break I'm bringing?
I was thinking 5 minutes, but if everybody wants to go ahead and proceed so that we can finish a little bit earlier, then that's fine.
Yes.
You guys want to proceed?
All right.
Okay. So we're back.
We have my hands up.
Okay. Any question, doubts from anybody?
Yes, Mr. Ronnie. I remember that in our village, Sartenea, we used to have a radio, but I am not sure. Do we still have one available?
Yes, I can answer you that from the top of my head. Sarteneham has VHF radios, and the guy in charge of operations, and you might know him, is Mr. Roger. He's a police officer at the police station.
Okay, thanks.
His name is PC Roger Augustine.
Okay. Because at first it used to be at a teacher's house, Mr. Higinia Munoz.
Munoz, that's right. We still in fact we have plan A, B, and C for Saturday. Plan A is PC Roger Augustine. Plan B is Genio Munoz, and Plan C we have Coast Guard there too.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Any other question? Anybody? Okay, let's proceed.
Jesse Aldana has, oh, that was the same. Okay, so she still has her hand up.
Okay. Now, activating the EOC. Different levels of activation. We have the partial activation, the semi-activation, and the complete activation, which is categorized under level 1, level 2, and level 3. Now, level 1 is where we had minor incidents of threat that required less than half the to respond. For example, we have a 1, 2, 3 in a unit. We have part of the part where we had coastal inundation or part of inundation in Chunosh or Copperbank. This is where we respond, and some of the agencies respond to it. For example, we do a on-site inspection from the Relief and Supplies Management Committee, which is in this case Human Development. We deploy sometimes Mr. Belli and myself, and along with BDF, and we take an on-site, and we retrieve back to head to the EOC center, and we send the information of what we caught on the field to the headquarters level. Level 2 is where incident or threats require more than half of our agency to respond EOCs. And this is where we supervise, you know. We had the ETA IOTA situation last year, if everybody can recall. I know that Sarteneja do recall, where we had a good amount of the populace being affected. Now, this is where some of the 15 operational committees, not all, because we have different categories when it comes to NEMO. We have the before, during, and after. So the after committees, which were the teams that were deployed, agriculture, which was the damage assessment, needs and analysis that was deployed in Fireburn. We have the SATENEA, which is the Relief and Supplies Management Committee, Ms. Carnelle Fritz, you know. And this is where, from the command center, the coordinator and the regional coordinator manage and coordinates that these teams reach from point A to point B, bring back the information, you know, and send to headquarters, and after that you can recover. So this is where the level 2, which is the semi-activation. And we have the level 3, which is incident requires all agencies and higher authorized mobilization and coordination needed, you know. This is where the EOC directs all responses, you know. We have a director at the moment that is vacant in COROZAL. The chairperson and the entire EOC is working for one. We had the past director, and I give kudos to him. I would like to mention him, Mr. Victor Recinos, which is a custom officer. He is a retired now. He used to be the officer in charge in COROZAL. And we are currently looking for somebody, because the director must have the experience and the knowledge, either military or has the knowledge when it comes to hurricanes, tracking. And we have the chairperson, which is the area rep or the senior minister, you know, the vice chairperson, which is the mayor or the deputy mayor, and the rest of the 15 operational committees. And this is where we meet. We actually have our meetings and try to decipher, to make logistics, to have this communication between us and have our small teams. And there must be a schedule of how the shift will be worked out at the District Emergency Committee Emergency Operation Command Center. Certain threats require progressive activation. For example, as I mentioned, we have a 1, 2, 3 days rain. Some of the villages, for example, Calcutta, Ranchito, which we know that is a high elevation, they won't be impacted by this flood or any inundation. But we have Libertad, 1, 2, 3 days rain, and because of the clogging of the culvert system and stuff, we do need to respond to them. Now, before I proceed to the next slide, well, this is how it should work out. Level 1, 2, and 3. You see the key personnel only monitor. Level 2, supervise. Partial key personnel from responding agencies. And level 3, where we have the full, which is the all personnel. And activating the EOC. Okay, in this level 3, I'll be showing you a video whenever we had an incident last year and how we meet up with the full activation, which each officer in charge activates. Now, activating the EOC, information management process. The EOC task actions are based on the NEMO executive, the NEMO ministry, or the district chairperson, as I mentioned, directs, in which in this case, can anybody let me just ask this to a random question to anybody that can answer. Does anybody know who is the district chairperson in COROZAL district when it comes to NEMO? Anybody? No answers are wrong, you know. Remember I explained that the district chairperson supposed to be a minister. Does anybody know who is the chairperson of COROZAL? Anybody from Sardinia that probably got assistance from last year Eta Iota situation? Okay, let me ask a random person. Miss Bibiani Yam, do you know who would happen to be the district chairperson of the Emergency Operation Committee here in COROZAL district? Everybody took a break.
Can you repeat the question, sir?
Remember I explained that we have system approaching, and I said that emergency operation composed of chairperson, the coordinator, the regional coordinator, the chairperson, which would be a minister, and the vice chairperson, which would be the mayor or the deputy mayor. Do you happen to know who
Is it Honorable Florencio Marin?
That is right. Honorable Florencio Marin is the senior minister, and he's the one in charge for the chairperson, leading the chairperson in the Emergency Operation Committee. That is right, Ms. Yam. Thank you very much. So there you have it, guys. The minister of the district, for example, we have the minister in the national level, which is Honorable Habet, and we have in the COROZAL district, which is Honorable Marin. So these are the persons that directs priority actions to the EOC staff or action that is required based on any incident reports coming into the Emergency Operation Committee. And the incident report task is analyzed by the director and the coordinator. So it means that we have this director and the coordinator that must lobby and say, you know, these are the decisions and these are the reports, and digest it from there and send it to the national level. Then it passed to the relevant committees, which is the logistic officer stating what is to be done and why, where, and by what time. Because during an activation, you cannot, you know, you have to know what you're doing, because if you don't know what you're doing, everybody would be running like chicken without head. And you must act quick, because time is very important for us in order to save lives. Okay, let me project to you how it looks whenever there's an activation. A full in this video that I will be showing you, it is a full activation, with the exception of one member that couldn't make it because of an emergency. This is last year, and I'll show you some of the few years. Okay, this is how it would look like in an emergency operation committee. And I know I have shown you the layout of the first EOC command center, which is at Santa Rita, but due to COVID-19 at its peak, we had to social distance and improvise. So we do have the IT vet. And also, I didn't mention that sometimes Ministry of Education and the Agriculture Department, and sometimes even St. Francis Xavier Credit Union, tags along in and give us their conference room to actually do meetings because of this social distancing. In this one, we have the Ministry of Education conference room offering their conference room to have our meetings. So I'll just, quickly play it and fast forward it so you can see how it looks like. The Emergency Operation Committee. Then, as you notice, and some of us, and I would say majority of us, I would like to applaud you guys, that COROZAL Council Police, Fire, and the BDF present with us, and that was in February. February, right? February. And a minutes of a meeting has been prepared and sent out to the headquarters level. So we have the minutes of the meeting. 100% of the plans have been submitted, and new COROZAL is joining all the plans to make a COROZAL district plan. So when it comes to this COROZAL district plan, I would say it is ready, but then we need to incorporate the two other committees, which is the maritime and the special. There are retired police, retired teachers, retired nurses, and these persons are willing to help in their community. So they're getting trained and they are being incorporated into an official. I just added some different events, using catalog information and the different layers. So that what you're seeing is the inundation that would, and I will be zoom out, which is the COROZAL district. It will show the COROZAL town when it comes from category 1 to category 5. So it gives us tsunami or a hurricane modeling of how many people will be affected. If we take off the turbulence and the wind, that is COROZAL town right there, and it will show that Sardinia will be the one that will be the most affected one. So yeah, this is the actual activation of each officer in charge, all the different committees, as I mentioned, with the exception of one. We have the chairperson, the minister, they are activating, all the district coordinator, the regional coordinator, doing their thing. So let me project some of the pictures, because as my colleague, Mr. Parham mentioned, Emergency Operation Committee, EOC, stands for Command, and control. And this is where we have the introduction, you know. This is where it starts. Remember, an EOC must not take long to set up. It must not take more than 30 minutes. To me, I would, you know, could not take 1 hour. And then everybody should give their introduction. And everybody, we have human development, police, the BDF. We have Mr. Felipe Fabro. If you can recall, we have Mr. Felipe Fabro right here, you know, from the BLAST. He's the one representing BLAST, the Belize Local Association of Tourism. We have Red Cross. We have Staff Sergeant there. We have Ministry of Works, you know. All the rest of them presenting their self and giving their state and report and state of readiness, standing operating procedure, and sticking to their plans. In this case, it was 2021. There are different plans. You know, Transport Department, everybody know Mr. Diego, Mr. Frankie Lopez, and the Town Council. So that is, ladies and gentlemen, how we activate when it comes to the fully activation of the EOC. I'm not sure. Any questions so far? Doubts? Just project this. Okay. Loading. Okay. This is day 1. Questions, anybody? Let me just take a while to find the presentation of today. Okay. There you go. So any questions on the activation, as I mentioned, of the EOC before we go to the standing operating procedures? Okay then. Mr. Kenton, the floor is all yours. So there's no questions or doubts. And proceed the presentation. You there with us, Mr. Kenton?
Yeah, sorry about that. My mic was off.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. The next 2 or 3 slides deals with standard operating procedures, or what we refer to as SOPs. Right? It's a tool that allows the EOC to better coordinate in a standard format, standard way, actions in the EOC and on the ground in simple and routine manner. Right? You all know that it's hard to remember everything that you need to do, and especially so in a time, you know, when you're dealing with some of these situations which can be very stressful. And so the SOP is a very useful tool in helping us to stay on track, stay on target, and to be able to manage the situation properly. And so there's SOPs for a number of different things within the EOC. There's an SOP on how to, how the message handlers and the communications persons should operate. And there's an SOP on how to deal with the incident at different stages and different levels. Every district have a multi-hazard district disaster response plan, right? But when you're faced with these impending hazards, then it's very difficult, and it's not practical for you to pull out that plan and start to search through the pages and to see what you should do. Over a period of time, you tend to grasp the knowledge, and doing it several times help you to anticipate your course of action. However, having an SOP, a written SOP that is pulled out of the plan in actuality, and it's a part of the plan, but kind of summarize the actions that should be taken and should be focused on when dealing with an incident as per different stages, right? So it's a very useful tool. SOPs indicate the pre-planned action needed for a particular scenario or event or situation. So if we're dealing with a flood situation, there's certain course of action that we would take within the EOC. And if we're dealing with a hurricane or tsunami, there's a different course of action that we would take in dealing with the different incident. And having that properly outlined for every member for all the staff within the Emergency Operations Center, and especially for the directors and the coordinators who have to guide that process, the SOP is an invaluable tool. Adherence to the SOP usually speeds response, and like I said, it keeps us on track and it keeps us focused on the task at hand, right? They must be readily available. So, on the desk, post up on one of your bulletin boards, or where people can access and see it readily available. No, they can be used as a guide and also as a training document. So if you see a SOP for a hurricane, it is basically would be sectioned off in different phases from the preliminary stage all the way down to the all clear. And each phase has a different set of actions and different set of timing as per the tracking chart. And the whenever we reach certain phases, we step into a different set of tasks, right? And this helps us again, like to stay on track. So you can have an SOP for a simple incident. When I say simple, I mean and not for instance, like a message handling, and then you'll have the bigger SOP for managing phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of a hurricane, right? SOP to relocate the EOC would be another vital tool to have in place, so that everybody knows what to do and when to do it, all right? And who is responsible for what, and that type of thing. So while you have your main plan that guides the whole planning process and preparation process and speaks to the responsibility areas of the different committees and so forth, when you actually get into action and you have to be responding, the SOP is a document that you resort to and that you consult, right? Slide. again, here are some very important SOPs that will be extremely beneficial and helpful within the EOC, right? The public alert and warning, right? There needs to be one for that. Emergencies, if and one of the emergencies, like I described, was the relocation of the EOC. You know, you're functioning, everybody's in the EOC, something happens that compromises the EOC, that's an emergency. And you know, you pull out the SOP, okay, this is what we need to do. This section, this section, this section, you know, and it spells it out there for you. And so you know exactly how to function and how to go about dealing with that emergency. EOC activation is another area that an SOP is helpful, right? Message handling, again, that I spoke about. The EOC handing over reporting or briefing needs to have a very basic few steps that you take, and you make sure you cover and just check them off when handing over, and it helps with that continuity from one person to the next. As you know, we might be for days in an operation center, and so you're in a rotation shift. And so when you're handing over, when the next person show up, it's not just to say hi and bye, right? You have to brief that person on what had occurred within the last couple hours that you were on shift, and what the person can expect going into another 8 hours of shift based on the activity and the incident occurring at that time. And so an SOP, you know, to just to cross check that, make sure everything is being conveyed and being handed over properly is helpful. And this is for every one of the 15 or 13 committees in the EOC, as well as when the director hand over to the deputy and back and forth, right? And the operations officers. So that's good there. The deactivation as well for the EOC is another area that an SOP would be helpful on, right? So if we would do an exercise, this is one of an EOC exercise to test to see how we can function within an EOC. This is a document that will help you to get through that test, right? And help you to get through an incident, right? Next slide. Outlining of an EOC activation SOP purpose. State what the SOP is trying to accomplish. So say why the SOP is important. The authority, who has the authority? At least 3 persons in succession by appointment. Not name is stated under the heading, under this heading. So you could put the title of the person or whatever. Conditions, state what the conditions presently is at the point of handing over. What are some of the, you might be handing over a shift where in the middle of an incident that your committee is responsible for. Say for instance, you have a team doing an evacuation of one of the keys, all right? And your shift ends without that being completed. When the next person comes in and take over from you, you have to describe the conditions that and the task, and update that person as it relates to that particular task that you're supposed to, that committee is supposed to accomplish. So give him as much information based on what you have. Again, you would probably meet around your status board and go over your status board, which should reflect your course of action over the last hours that you have been there, and then pointing that person to some of the important tasks that are upcoming as it relates to that particular committee going into the next couple hours. All right. Alert procedure, attach the alert list that will be used to call out the EOC staff. This is another area that you can have an EOC, an SOP outline on who will be calling, who will be doing the calls, how will you communicate with the person? You'll send text, then you follow up with a phone call, or send a message, or what is the mode of communication that will be utilized in ensuring that everybody get the information. Maybe utilize a group chat and that kind of thing. So there's a couple steps that you need to follow through to ensure that everybody is receiving a communication, right? Doing your alert procedures, right? The setting up, the opening of the EOC, the activation of the EOC. Again, this is part of the activation. And this is if you don't have an EOC already set up, if you need to go on and say you're relocating the EOC, who will set up? And again, I had mentioned in the previous session, CERT could be a part of activity like this in terms of setting up an EOC in an alternate location. So your your EOC, your SOP is a basic, simple document that helps you to accomplish your task without missing any of the important steps that you have to consider, and ensuring that there's proper continuity when you're handing over to another person in your committee. We tend to think that we will remember a lot of things, but when you actually in that situation, you realize this slipped me, or that slipped me, or I forget to do this, or I forget to do that, and I didn't call that person, and you run into that situation. So, and what the SOP does is it helps to eliminate that sort of thing, so you can have a more efficient response to the incident that you're responding to. Right? So you can have an SOP for very basic tasks, and you can have an SOP for more complicated tasks. But what it does, it breaks it down into bite-sized pieces, if you will, for you to make it more manageable. Right? And SOP and how you deal with the media is another good thing to have, right? So everybody that deals with the media within your organization knows exactly what's protocol and how you handle that person, right? The example, the next slide is Ronnie's, but an example, I think I had an example of an activation at the EOC that I use. If I could, I'd look for, share that quickly, maybe it will be helpful. Ronnie, if I could share that quickly.
Sure, Mr. Lim. Do you want to stop sharing so you can share?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Just to give an idea, so if you see one, it's a basic document.
Okay. Can't share it now.
I'm not sure why. Okay, I just did the wrong thing. Not seeing it. All right, Ronnie, you could. I'm having some difficulty getting it up. It's open, but I'm not seeing it when I go to share. So could just continue. You could put back your presentation.
Okay. Okay. For the meanwhile, you can you just need to go on the icon that says share screen. But for the meanwhile,
Yeah.
the presentation. So when you find it, just you can intervene, no problem.
All right.
So we go to now to the reporting section. Now we must understand that reporting information is very crucial in order to do the next step and do tasks or send teams to actually respond. Now, the subordinate committees, agencies, or non-governmental agencies need to communicate information about the emergency conditions and the state of the affected population on a regular basis to the Emergency Operation Committee if they expect an appropriate response. Now, remember, as the EOC who operates, the coordinator, the different committees, you guys are sometimes on the ground, and if um members from the Sartenia can recall, for the Eta Iota, I like to bring this Eta and Iota because this was an incident, a flood situation incident, whereby the beauty of it is actually communication, the reporting. So Sartenia team, I like to applaud them. We have volunteers there, the committee itself, police department, the Coast Guard, even though for uncertain, I would like to say even Fireborn, and the Sealy's family, whereby we got the information, the reporting from them. I remember the training that has been done there on each village. Each village has received this training from the 27 villages and the 4 communities, including Kanlum and Helena. They have received this Kobo app application whereby human department and services have trained and alongside with myself for the portal to actually operate from using your phones. Your phones without internet access, you can get information and send it from point A to point B. Remember, we are living in the 21st century and we have to stick, we have the most powerful device right now. We're back then. We didn't had computers. You don't actually need to have a computer, a desktop, a laptop. You can with your own device. I mean, you can do wonders. So I'm not saying that moving from old school, but we have to also stick to the technology area. Whereby, for example, when you insert this information into the Kobo app where you don't need internet and certainly some of I don't know if anybody from here has received the training, but we have a group of people where they have received them from Sartenia, especially I recall I don't think if Mr. Jomael Verde is here. He has received the training and you have the application installed on your phone and they sent us for the ETA and IOTA, you know what? 200 people, an example, 200 people have been affected and they send information and whenever you snap a picture of the affected person or a video inside their home where they have been affected with flood inside their homes, it actually takes the location and the geotagging of the geographical um, pinpoints, and this is sent to the EOC in COROZAL because it would be time consuming if the team deploys, human development deploys from COROZAL to Sarteneja, utilizing Belize Defense Force trucks, the F-350s, and you have to go along 2 ferries and it is flooded. when you can actually send from Sarteneja to the EOC with pictures and evidence, and the EOC then send it to the national level, and then the national level can assist the people, you will get the appropriate response like it is. So I would like to bring this scenario in Sartenea. Also, Libertad, Louisville, Chula Vista, Paraíso, Santa Clara, San Roman did utilize this same way. And that is the reason why we give this training, because it is of importance. As I mentioned, all the villages have received this training and last year, and we're gonna do it again this year, but it would not be in every village. This year we will be concentrating more in the different other, for community emergency response team. What we're doing, we'll be going on to the other villages to get some more people, and the damage assessment needs an analysis from agriculture. Just in case from other villages that they do need the training, we can go way. At the moment, we cannot go and travel, be there face to face, because it impedes us. Ministry of Health does not want us to be having face to face at the moment. But we will count you in, and we can have your names, and we will train you for this COBO. And that is why it's important for the reporting to be happening as for the subordinate community and the communication between the EOC. Reporting to higher authorities communicates necessary information to assist local authorities, whereby they can assist their people. If you do not report, then we cannot know what is happening in your area, what is happening in your village, what is happening in your community. So that is important. The reporting must be there, must take place in order for us to respond. Meetings. Meetings during activation. I wouldn't call it that daily. We activate daily, we have meeting. In fact, sometimes 3 times a day or 2 times a day we meet, not just every day. It's 3 times a day, but it must be, as mentioned, daily. Meetings should include all key and relevant agency representative. As you saw on the video, each one represents a committee. For example, Ministry of Education is in charge of Housing and Shelter, and Education, Communication and Warning Committee. The Housing and Shelter is an important committee because these persons are connected. Ministry of Education is connected with their school principals, school staff, and the local managers. So at the end of the day, if there should be a shelter declared to be open, then they would give the go ahead, the green light. Meetings should focus on current and future activities, needs of the affected, indicating the responsible party of each activity with a timeline. Minutes should be kept to facilitate and follow up. Now, everything should be updated. That's why meetings happen, and it should be recorded. That is the reason we do minutes of a meeting. Each committee has a different responsibility. For example, the coordinator, me, myself, Mr. Kenton is a coordinator, and we have the regional coordinator. We cannot leave the command center and go to the affected area and just leave the EOC absent. Reason why, even in the military, you cannot leave your command center. Whenever there's time for interview, the information, the situation report is it needs to be sent in an interval of every hour, every 30 minutes to the headquarters, because the reporting will also be done by the national level, where our Prime Minister needs this information to tell the public what is happening. So by the time we go, for example, to Sarteneja or Copperbank or Paraíso, and we leave our command center, then whenever we come back, we won't be doing our jobs as it's supposed to be done. We won't be getting the assistance for you guys as fast as it goes. There should be a brain on it. So that is the reason why we have different responsibilities on different committees. And of course, as I mentioned, the recording media, which is the minutes of a meeting, and usually the Ministry of Education or the Human Resource Management Committee is in charge of that. And I will be showing pictures of how different incidents are from 2016, 17, 18, 19, but I'll just show you from 18 and 19 because it's a lot of pictures of how it happens and each committee is doing their responsibility. The briefing format, extent, the impact, number of people affected, areas affected, and damages. So the briefing should be in this certain format where it should give you numbers. You cannot just say, okay, well, half of Sartoneha was affected. You need to give a specific number. That is the reason we asked the Village Emergency Committee to constantly do the census. Right now, there is a census that is being done by the Proyecto Mesoamerica, and it utilizes HECOPAB. And this same information is what you're using because the Mesoamerica is utilizing the community health workers from their respective villages to do the census, and this is being divided into the committee. So let's say per se in a village you need to do a census. Why is this important to get this population of these certain villages? Because whenever you pay somebody else to do a census in a community or in a village, sometimes people get paid, and what happens? You go to a house, you knock at the door, the person is not there, so automatically the person jumps the houses because he has to continue doing the census, and they tend to forget this house, so it is not concise. But if the person lives in the village, that person can actually knock at the door and he or she can know how many people live in that home. And even more, they can even know if that person is diabetic, that person has hypertension, or um, is disabled. They would know all of that. So that is the reason we stick to the Mesoamerica one, which is being used by the Ministry of Health of HECOPAB. And that is the briefing format that we need. Numbers, areas affected, the certain areas. That is the reason we use the Kobo app. Whenever you snap a picture, it gives you the geotag, so it tells you which house is damaged. And the level of damages, is another training that we get from damage assessment needs and analysis. There's certain levels of damages. You cannot just report and say, okay, the house was damaged. You need to say the level. Was the roof blown? Did water get how many feet inside? What was damaged inside the house? Does the person need food? Does the person need water? So this has to be reported back to the Relief and Supplies Management Committee, which would be Human Development. Immediate needs of people. What do they need? And this is part of the census also. What if this person needs this person is type 1 or type 2 diabetic, and he or she needs insulin? So these are the things that will be reported into the committee, which is the Medical Care and Health, and who is responsible of this committee is Ministry of Health. There's also other needs of people, if they need water, if they need food. Let's say there's a power line that has been affected in their areas, and this is something dangerous. Then in our committee, we have the Belize Electricity Limited, the BTLs. We have the communications area, whereby we can actually tell the officer in charge so that they can send their teams to respond to that emergency. Number type of casualties, that is we need the type of the casualties that is happening in your area. What is actually flooding, or there needs to be unclogging of the drainage whereby Ministry of Works would assist. Current operations, well, this is where it undergoes of which committee is doing the operations. Future operations, what is the planning? Each village have a village plan, and the village plan consists of 2 pages with a format of the NEMO zone management system, whereby it tells you what should happen, how many persons are there, non-governmental agencies in the villages. As for planning, it is very important to know these people in the communities. As somebody mentioned from here, Sartanea said that if they do have VHF, I can tell you from the top of my head that they yes, because last year we had the meeting, and these plans have to be constantly updated. This is the type of information is what we need for future operational plans. Logistic required, the people in charge of the village emergency committee have, for example, the committee have their logistics, and as we do have in the emergency operation committee, what is the type of logistics that is required? What do we need? All right, search and rescue teams will be deployed in certain areas. Do we have search and rescue equipment? How many team would be going? Do we have enough for those teams? The Ministry of Health needs to send first aid kits to certain shelters. These are the things that are required, in order to prepare logistics. Questions. What type of question? In the brief format, there should be questions also. What are the different questions that we would ask? What, for example, the sit rep has what, where, when, what are you doing about it? We can just have the scenario of, okay, we had a category 3 hurricane, and we have debris. After the impact, we have people needing food. The questions are, how will it reach there? Do the proper logistics. When, at what time? Who would be the providers? What are the stores, that the local stores that will be supplying food to the people in certain areas? So this must be in place in order for the Resource Relief and Supplies Management Committee, which is human development, to respond to you guys. So we have all the committees in charge of doing their responsibilities, but in a briefing format. Sit reps, start state, and state boards. If you notice in the video that I showed you on the Emergency Operation Committee, we do have a classification, a table in the EOC that gives you what should be included in the sit rep. You did saw state boards and the start state. The start state is every emergency operation committee on each district must have a start state. Even headquarters, which is Belmopan, have their start state. And in this start state, we have assets available, and these are the different information we need. No, how many personnel in the EOC? Okay, we have 15, which you have the quantity. That is an example from Belize EOC. What is the location of that person? Where is that person residing? Who will be taking his shift hour? The responsibility, their contact information, person deployed, person on call, how many vehicles available. So all of this, the committees have their plan. For example, these vehicles available, we have the transport and evacuation committee that would give us boats, would give us because they're the one responsible for transportation, will give us if there's a bus, what is the safe zone area, which are the bus that already have a memorandum of understanding of how they will actually mobilize people. For example, Sartenia will be mobilizing to Orangewa complex, and this is the information that is needed to in the start state. Fuel, where will they fuel? Who will have the fuel card? Who's the person responsible? Because what we need to understand also is that I would like to bring this up because some of the villages ask me, some of them ask me, there was this special case in one village whereby many years ago, this entire group, we trained them as to evacuate people in times of emergency. Now, evacuating people from your village, for example, if you have 5 houses or they live in the same village and they need to go to the school, um, persons from the same village were evacuating people to the school, which is close to them in the same village, and people that are young. So they were fueling up and said, okay, Nemo's gonna pay this. That is not how the system works. There must be transparency, ladies and gentlemen. And Nemo does not provide in that type of evacuation. Reason why? It's the same village. You can make it from point A to point B. What was stressed though, the same committee, the village council, got together, and there was this guy with a pickup, a big F-350 pickup from cane farmer, and he said, we're going to coordinate of how to mobilize the elderly or people that are disabled. Now that makes sense. And they do it, and they run their own cars because of the village council. Sometimes people do this voluntarily, and I like to mention this because the humanitarian part of the person sometimes is not just price on it, and that is how they help out in the village. But if you're expecting, this guy brought a bill to Nemo and said, okay, um, we use $3,000 of diesel, and that is not how things operate. I just wanted to be clear on that because Nemo wouldn't entertain that. There must be a transparency. Nemo works transparent in all ways where they need to do accountability. There must be pictures of what you're using so that it could be held accountable. Shelters, there must be the quantity of shelters in the village, the location, who would be responsible to be the shelter manager, communication equipment, as they said, what would they use? VHF, and I know most of us have WhatsApp right now, or Facebook, or Messenger, or Twitter, Instagram, or some type of communication, and the contact information of that person, of course. um, Emergency food, that is where the human development builds a memorandum of understanding with the stores in your area of how many emergency food there is, how many emergency water, generators, how many generators are there in the village. It is not necessarily that Nemo will give you the generators, but they need to know how many generators they have. Probably there is a private business that do have a generator, and in time of emergency they would be using that. Well, of course, if the person does want to use it in the village, no, tents, how many tents there is, the hygiene, emergency radio, heavy equipment. This is part of the Nemo zone management system, and we call it start state in the EOC because heavy equipment sometimes do help a lot in a village, especially when there's flooding. So we have been, I don't know, Kenton can brief you up this in the south. I have seen pictures. I haven't been there. I was probably still in high school when they were utilizing some of those big dump trucks to transport people, backhoe. They are utilizing cane trucks. All of this is important to have in the start state or the Nemo zone management system. Medical facilities, how many polyclinics there is in the villages, the supplies, what do they have in there, and this information you can get it through the community health worker that is in charge of the village, etc. There is more to add in this start state. In the Nemo zone management system, we do have 30 fields to fill out, and this includes um, all of this with the exception of fuel and tents. The exception of fuel and tents, but we have more fields that we need to, like, each village should well, they have for the 2021, so this 2022 will make sure that they update it, and there should be constant updating every year. And the state board, that is what you have seen in the emergency operation committee. And the state board is any visual, as Kenton mentioned. Sometimes we do need to improvise. Before, we didn't have well, we were not fortunate to have whiteboards as we do had today. Back then, when Nemo operated, when it started, we didn't had whiteboards and some not even chalkboards, so they had to improvise on using shop paper, or Bristol board, you know. This is to actually display the information for the purpose of operational continuity. Um, this depends on the shift hours of how many people and officers in charge will be. Either the officer or the second officer in charge will be taking shift. They should reach to an agreement of constant updating this information on their whiteboard, because whenever the director or the chairperson or inclusive anybody from the committee that want to take a look of what's going on, sometimes the shelter management, the housing and shelter committee must want to know what how many vehicles will be deploying from the EOC to actually take food. So this, you can see it on the display information that will be set up in the EOC. Each representative of LOs in the EOC will need a state board to track resources and follow up on activities. As you have seen, there is 15 whiteboards, and we have additional more in the EOC just in case other people would want to use. You know, sometimes Red Cross would like to use another whiteboard, or other committee. A state board can be rough or electronic. Most people in our EOC use both. Sometimes, well, documentation must be there, and they use the electronic. We use the database, we use Excel, or we use Swifting, or they use the state board, which is the whiteboard or the blackboard, and sometimes even paper. So it must be either or, and it's both. Always good to have both. Which in COROZAL they use both, because sometimes technology fails us, you know. There's no current, there's no internet, so we have to go back to the old school. And this is how the state board would look like, more or less. Water taxi, and this is what transport evacuation. Okay, we have the resources of 16 boats, and the location of it: San Pedro Belize Express, Brown Sugar Terminal, task 3 departed to Kitkakar. Total available, we have 13. You know, if you add up 13 and choose give you 16 remarks, 3 will require fuel by 3 p.m. So the other person, the second officer in charge that comes in for the transport, for example, the first officer in charge at the moment is Miss Diego, and she will be probably writing this, and she have already completed her 6-hour shift in the emergency operation committee. Because something to note is that emergency operation committee, as Kenton mentioned, we have to stay there, we sleep there, there's bathroom, there's cuts, we stay there, and then the feeding arrangement will be made between the human development, which is relief and supplies management committee, and the person that already, I don't know how this shift hours will be working between the departments or the ministry from other entities or the committees, but most of them take 6 to 8 hours shift, and they utilize different persons from the same department or ministry. As same as for sanitation trucks, and sometimes sanitation trucks, if you notice, we do have town council that do have sanitation trucks, and town council does take different shift when it comes to the emergency operation committee. Situation reports, and this is what was placed in the EOC in the wall, whereby we have date, time submitted as that. For example, you're gonna write a situation report every 30 hour. You need to report to Belmont Pan and send this. Um, if you're gonna write January 12th, 2022, what happened? Well, rain started from the morning, has not stopped. Where did it happen? Whole COROZAL district. Um, when, and you have to be specific of the time. Who and what affected? Have the village emergency committee contacted you? And this is the reason why we need persons from the different villages, and we have the broadcast and the application in COROZAL that they inform us through WhatsApp, VHF, or normal calls, and tell us. Even River Monitor, so you know what, Mr. Hernandez, the water has raised 1 inch or 2 inches. So all of this has to be in the situation report. What is being done about it? Is there anybody that is being affected about it? What is being done? You know, do people are asking for food, or look, they are seeking shelter? All of this must be included in the sit rep. Okay, let me Any questions so far? Renice, Candice, yeah, sharing screen.
Hi, Ronnie. I didn't hear what you said.
Are you sharing screen?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, guys. So we're almost at the end. We have 2 more slides. We're almost at the end of this of tonight's presentation.
Let me just show some pictures, Renice, for the see
Sure.
activations and the SIG reps and how they operate. Serious.
Do you need me to stop sharing? Yeah, let me stop sharing. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
I guess while you're looking that up, I can just go over the last two briefly. Um, yeah, that's okay, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think you can go through.
Yeah,
You can go through.
we could do two right at the same time, you think, or you do you need to explain the sit rep?
No, no, no. I was go through pictures of EOT
All
when we
right.
had
Okay.
um
All right, so guys, from all that information that was presented, you could see where the climate in the EOC can be, the tension can run high. I mean, you have people working for hours, you have different personalities coming together and all that. So there are different situations in addition to operations that you may be facing or that people in the emergency operation centers would be facing. And it's due to the situation, the event. You can have family concerns as well. If we have members on the emergency operation center who maybe do not have a family plan and they're not sure as to how their family is well taken care of, that person cannot perform to their best ability. And so this is why we try to ensure that members have their families taken care of, because it's very difficult to take care of an entire community when um, your household is not taken care of. Um, Inexperienced staff can also pose an issue. I mean, if you have a new team and people do not know their plans and don't know what to do, that can definitely create a problem in the emergency operation center. And of course, you have the difference of perception. We're all different. We're all our own unique human beings, and we see things differently. But for the most part, when you're relating to the magnitude of events, we need to sort of be on the same page. If, for example, in terms of saying, well, everybody in a Libertad need food. The village flood out, everybody need food. That might not be the situation on the ground. Maybe there may be some families who are contained and who have supplies. So that not everybody need food. Okay. So the working conditions can also present a stressful situation. If you have lack of equipment, if you do not have a backup power supply, you're in trouble. And that can be a frustrating situation. The temperature, if it's too hot, if it's too cold, then you have the poor lighting. If the lighting is not right, then that can be a bad turnout as well. The working hours. What's very important is that EOC members should have a shift system in place so that everyone is not burning their midnight candle at the same time. It's not effective. It does not work. I mean, if you're tired, there is no way that you can function properly, and you might cause frustration for your other team members. So even if you're still there at the emergency operations center, while somebody else is doing their thing, you could be sleeping in the in the other room. Of course, you have limited space and then poor administration. So I see Ron is sharing those pictures of the EOC in action.
That is right. We have a lot of pictures when we activate, and everything for record purpose. Sometimes it's done with videos and pictures. So as I mentioned, there must be the sit rep along with the minutes of the meeting and pictures. So I'll stop sharing the minutes and
Okay. All right. So this EOC training was actually designed for members of the EOC. I think that we showed you a lot, and usually these exercises, these training sessions would end in an exercise. Let me I'll go ahead and share. These training would end in an exercise, and so um, some of the benefits of we have some of the benefits of exercises listed here. So basically, it brings out issues. Okay, if the exercise, if say for instance a tabletop exercise, a discussion-based exercise is showing that these people aren't planning, it really brings out weaknesses in planning. It also improves coordination and communication. It clarifies roles and responsibilities. Sometimes people really do not know what their roles are. It reveals resource gaps, and it also gains the public support. All right. So this next slide is just a review of some of the key points. I know we're a little over time. The next slides that follow, we have 3 quick quiz questions, which we can do tomorrow. We'll just state the questions and then we'll do it first thing in tomorrow's session. But these are just some of the key points from the other slides. So we have that the EOC stands for Emergency Operations Center. Okay, we do have different terms that the same EOC can go by, but in Belize we commonly refer to them in emergency management as emergency operations centers. So it is where coordination of resources takes place based on priorities. Okay, and not everything should be not everything is important, and EOCs need to establish that. So it is a safe and functional space. It is where response and recovery operations are carried out, and constant communication is vital. Okay, EOC members are communicating with each other. The EOC is communicating with the public. The EOC is communicating with CERTs. CERTs are communicating with the EOC. So communication is everything. The EOC must survive its effects from hazards it was designed to withstand. We have some countries who, when there's a major disaster, we've seen in the past where EOCs were flooded, and this is why an alternate EOC is very important. Ronnie went over the 3 levels of activation. Not every single incident requires a full activation of all your committee members. Okay, and then we went over the overall reporting required from your EOC and how the information that you're giving feeds into those reports. And so this is why accurate documentation is very important. And then so these are the questions that we'll go over tomorrow. So what roles does an EOC perform that can save lives and properties? We'll put these in the chat as well. If individual ministries or departments can handle certain emergencies, why is an EOC necessary? Think Ministry of Health right now with the pandemic. Besides staffing, what are some resources required to keep an EOC functioning? So do we have any questions? I know somebody had asked about elaborating on See, I don't have my phone. To elaborate on the slide on forget territorial interests. I'm not sure if it was just the one on territorial interest that you wanted elaboration on, Wendy. So I was trying to explain that when we say forget territorial interest, it is cases like, say, for instance, a town hall will be used as an emergency operation center. Okay, you have people who work there, and then you work at another location. So as if forget territorial interest is, not because this is your office space that you use on a day-to-day basis, means that, you can, bully and tell everybody else what to do, and have the same, you know, demeanor or such that you normally carry through. I hope this is explaining. I think I answered the question in the chat. I'm not sure if that answers the question. All right, so
Yes, that was a great answer.
all right. So guys, if we okay.
You want to ask a different question?
Okay. Yeah, we're at the questions section. Anybody else have anything that they would like to add or share before we end tonight's session? Okay, emails of the slides. Can we get emails of the slides? Yes, and this was something that I realized we messed up on, and I'm sorry, guys. We send out the presentations beforehand, and this was just something that was overlooked. Tomorrow we will definitely send this to you ahead of time, just so that you can have a little heads up as to what we will be discussing. Some people like to read these things before coming into a training session. So I apologize for that. And Ronnie will work on getting these presentations out to the participants beforehand. And all the others that we have done, the 3 that we've done so far, we'll send that as well in the form of a PDF.
That is right, Renise. So I'll also be sending the links for the virtual days that have already passed, including this one.
Okay, guys. So if we don't have anything, the floor is open.
Before we wrap it up, yes. Somebody was saying something. Any questions, doubts, concerns? Okay, so I guess we wrap it up from here, Renise.
Yeah, well, I don't have much to say, but thanks, guys, and good night. We really appreciate the time you're spending here with us out of your busy schedules, and some people taking hours out of their sleep schedules. Some people go to bed at 8 o'clock, like myself, but we're here.
Thank you to everybody that joined in today. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Have a pleasant good day.
Good night. Good night. Have a good night. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Miss Jessie. Good night, Mr. Jomael, Mr. Gonzalo, Sean.